On my business trip, my own mom faked Grandpa's emergency just to steal $4.2 million. But she didn't know I'd take the company overnight. Please stay with me as I tell you my story, and please do not forget to support our channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing with your loved ones. My name is Caroline Monroe. I'm in my early 30s, and I've spent most of my adult life trying to hold my family's company together. After my father's health began to decline, I took over the responsibilities no one else wanted. I worked long nights, sacrificed weekends, and poured everything into keeping his legacy alive. I never did it for money or recognition. I did it because family meant everything to me, and I wanted my father to know his work would always be safe in my hands. But the truth is, family doesn't always mean love. My mother, Elaine, had always been distant, more critical than caring. She showered my brother Derek with praise while I was always the one she pushed aside. I brushed it off as favoritism, but deep down I knew she resented me for being the one Dad trusted most. When he officially placed me in charge, the tension only grew worse. Mom's smile never reached her eyes whenever the company was mentioned, and she often made comments about how stressful my role must be. When I was assigned to a crucial business trip that could secure a major partnership, I thought she was just being her usual self when she asked too many questions about the details. She wanted to know when I was leaving, how long I'd be gone, and what documents I was carrying with me. I laughed it off, assuming she was finally showing interest in my work. I had no idea she was setting a trap behind that soft tone. As I packed my bags, I felt both nervous and proud. This deal would prove everything I had worked for, and I knew Dad would have been proud to see me step into the role with confidence. I kissed Grandpa goodbye, promised to call him after my flight, and ignored the uneasy way Mom looked at me as I left. I didn't realize then that my biggest betrayal wasn't going to come from strangers in the boardroom, but from the very woman who gave me life. Growing up, I never felt like I truly belonged to my mother. Elaine always made it clear who her favorite was, and it was never me. My brother Derek could do no wrong in her eyes. Even as kids, when he broke things or skipped school, she excused it with a smile. But if I ever slipped up, no matter how small, I was scolded and told I wasn't good enough. I tried harder and harder, hoping one day she'd look at me with the same pride she gave him so easily, but that day never came. Some memories still sting even after all these years. I remember bringing home a science project I had worked on for weeks, so excited to show her. Instead of acknowledging my effort, she brushed past me and bragged to the neighbors about Derek scoring a single goal in a school soccer match. It was like that my whole life. My achievements were invisible, while Derek's smallest successes were celebrated. Over time, I learned not to expect much from her, but the absence of a mother's support left a hole I couldn't ignore. The only comfort I had was the bond one shared with my father and my grandfather, Henry. My dad saw how hard I worked, and he always told me he believed in me. He wasn't loud with his praise, but when he handed me responsibility for the company before his health failed, it was his way of saying he trusted me more than anyone else. Grandpa Henry, too, became my safe place. He listened when I needed to talk, reminded me of my worth, and always encouraged me to stand tall no matter how others treated me. That trust from my father and grandfather only deepened the resentment in my mother's eyes. When the company's control passed to me, I saw her expression change completely. She never said it outright, but I knew she thought Derek should have been the one in charge. She carried that bitterness like a shadow, and I could feel it every time we were in the same room. Just before I left for the important business trip, my phone rang. It was Elaine. Her voice was unusually gentle, almost sweet, as she asked about my travel plans. She wanted to know where I was staying, who I was meeting, and when I'd return. Something about the call unsettled me, but I brushed it off, convincing myself she was finally trying to show interest. I told her only what she needed to know and hung up, but the unease lingered. I didn't realize it then, but that call wasn't about care or concern. It was the beginning of a plan she had been quietly shaping for a long time. A plan where I was nothing more than an obstacle standing in her way. The morning of my trip was filled with nerves and excitement. I had been preparing for weeks, and this meeting could open doors that would secure the company's future. I tried to keep my mind focused on the task ahead, but in the middle of it all, my phone rang. My mother's voice came through in a panic. She said Grandpa Henry had collapsed, that he had a heart attack, and I needed to get back home right away. Her words shook me to the core. I froze, unable to breathe properly. My heart raced as guilt washed over me. How could I be miles away while something like this happened? I didn't stop to question anything. I didn't even think about the deal I had been working toward for so long. All I could imagine was my grandfather lying helpless, maybe even taking his last breath without me there. Within minutes, I canceled my meetings, rearranged my flights, and rushed back. The journey home felt endless. My mind wouldn't rest, running through every terrible possibility. I pictured hospital rooms, doctors shaking their heads, and the heartbreak of losing the man who had always been my support. Tears kept forming in my eyes as I replayed every conversation we ever had, terrified it might be the last time I'd ever get to remember his voice. When I finally arrived, I ran straight to his house, barely able to hold myself together. But instead of finding chaos or emergency lights, I opened the door to see Grandpa sitting calmly in his chair, sipping tea. He looked up, surprised to see me, and asked why I was home so early. My body went cold. For a second, I thought I was dreaming or had misunderstood something. I asked him if he was feeling all right, if he had been in any pain, and he gave me a puzzled look. He hadn't had any health scare at all. Confusion turned into disbelief. I pulled out my phone, rereading the call details, replaying my mother's words in my head. She had been so convincing, her tone filled with fear. Yet here was Grandpa, perfectly fine, with no idea what I was talking about. A wave of realization began to creep in, and my stomach tightened. Something wasn't right. I tried to brush off my panic, telling Grandpa I just wanted to check in on him. But inside, questions screamed louder and louder. Why would my mother lie about something this serious? What could she possibly gain by dragging me back home in such a cruel way? Sitting across from him, watching him calmly leaf through a newspaper, I knew this wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate. A trap had been set, and I had walked right into it. Something far darker than I could imagine was waiting beneath the surface, and I was only beginning to see the edges of it. When I walked into the office after cutting my trip short, I felt unsettled, but nothing could have prepared me for what I discovered. At first, everything seemed normal. The staff greeted me, papers were on desks, and the day was moving as usual. But when I checked the financial reports, my chest tightened. Several transactions had been pushed through while I was away, and the numbers didn't add up. I scanned the records again and again, and the figures stared back at me. Over $4 million had been withdrawn from the company account. My mind spun. I thought maybe it was a mistake, maybe some temporary transfer I wasn't told about. I contacted our finance department, and the response hit like a brick wall. The paperwork showed authorization under my name, yet I had never signed anything. Confused, I asked for the originals. When they brought the documents forward, I felt my knees weaken. My signature was there, but I knew immediately it wasn't mine. I dug deeper, asking questions, pressing harder, and soon the picture became clear. My mother had convinced a longtime family attorney that I was under too much pressure and had temporarily given her the right to act for me. Using this story, she managed to stage documents and work with Derek to drain money from the company. It wasn't a careless move. It was carefully planned, executed with precision, as if she had been waiting for the right moment. The betrayal cut deep, not only because of the money but because of who did it. This was my mother. The woman who should have protected me had chosen to stab me in the back instead. The thought of Derek being part of it only twisted the knife further. He had always been her favorite, but I never believed they would go this far together. I couldn't hold back. I drove to her house, holding the fake papers in my hands, shaking with anger. When I walked in, she didn't even look surprised to see me. I demanded answers, my voice trembling, asking how she could do this to me. She stood there calmly, almost smug, and said words that I'll never forget. "You never deserved this company. I just took what should have been Derek's all along." Her voice was sharp, cold, and filled with resentment. It was like she had been waiting for the chance to say it. My heart broke right there. I had worked so hard to keep everything together, believing family meant loyalty, only to find out my own mother saw me as nothing but a thief of what she believed belonged to her son. Standing across from her, I realized I had lost more than money. I had lost trust, safety, and whatever fragile bond we had left. In that moment, I understood the truth. This wasn't just betrayal. This was war. I left my mother's house that evening with my hands shaking and my chest heavy. The words she had spoken echoed in my head, cutting me over and over. I couldn't understand how the woman who raised me could plan something so cruel, let alone involve my brother in it. The money mattered, of course, but what broke me was the truth that my own blood saw me as nothing more than an obstacle. For days, I wandered through the motions of life in a fog. I went to the office, but I couldn't focus. I came home, but sleep never came easily. I kept asking myself what I had done to deserve this. Was my only mistake working hard and trying to protect the company my father built? Every time I tried to find an answer, I felt myself falling deeper into despair. One night, as I sat in my father's old study, I noticed a framed picture of us on the desk. Memories rushed back, him teaching me how to handle contracts, reminding me to read every line twice, telling me to never let anyone trick me out of what was mine. Then I remembered his final words before he passed. Protect what's yours. Don't let anyone take it away from you. Hearing those words in my head was like a spark in the darkness. For the first time since the betrayal, I felt a sense of strength return. My mother and Derek had taken advantage of me, yes, but that didn't mean I had to let them win. I realized I had two choices: crumble under the weight of betrayal or stand up and fight back. And I knew what my father would want me to do. That night I made a promise to myself: I would not be a victim. If Elaine and Derek thought they could destroy me quietly, they were wrong. I had more than hurt inside me now. I had determination. The very next morning, I began working in silence. I didn't confront them again, not yet. Instead, I started collecting everything I could find: emails, transaction records, the forged signatures, and communication with the attorney. Piece by piece, I built a trail of evidence, making sure each detail was solid. At first, it was painful to go through the files, each one a reminder of their betrayal. But the more I gathered, the clearer my mind became. The despair that had almost drowned me started to shift into focus. I was no longer asking why they did this. Instead, I was asking how I could stop them from ever doing it again. Every night, I locked myself in the office and worked quietly, determined not to give them even a hint of my plan. My heart was still bruised, but beneath the pain, a fire had been lit. I knew this was just the beginning of a battle I had no choice but to fight. I worked quietly, careful not to let my mother or Derek notice what I was doing. In the beginning, it felt like I was sifting through ashes, but slowly, pieces of truth began to show themselves. Hidden among files and emails were threads that tied their actions together. I found messages exchanged between them, cold and calculated, talking about transfers and how to cover their tracks. Each word confirmed what I already knew, but had tried so hard not to believe. They had thought of everything, even forging my name to make it look as if I had approved their moves. Every new discovery cut deep, but I didn't let myself collapse again. Instead, I saved every document, every screenshot, every signature. I organized them in a way that would leave no doubt when the time came. I wanted to cry, to scream, but I reminded myself this was not the time for emotions. It was the time to prepare. The weight of being both a daughter and a business leader was crushing. I still found myself staring at my mother's picture on the wall sometimes, asking silently why she hated me enough to do this. But each time, I forced myself back to focus. Love could not blind me anymore. If I wanted to protect everything my father entrusted to me, I had to act like the leader he believed I could be. I couldn't do it all alone. That was when I turned to Mason Clark, the company's CFO, and one of the few people I trusted without hesitation. Mason had stood by me through long nights of building projects, through tough board meetings, and he had never once doubted my ability. When I told him everything, his face hardened, not with shock but with loyalty. He didn't hesitate to stand with me. Together, we began building a plan that would change everything. We knew going directly at Elaine and Derek would give them time to twist the story and cover their lies. So instead, we decided to strike silently. Mason and I met late at night in the office when most people had gone home. We mapped out steps carefully, from restructuring the leadership chart to preparing the documents that would strip them of power. The more we worked, the stronger I felt. For the first time since the betrayal, I had control again. We called it our midnight takeover, because once it was set in motion, everything would shift overnight. Elaine and Derek would wake up thinking they still had control, only to realize it was gone from their hands forever. Every detail was crafted with precision. It wasn't about revenge for revenge's sake. It was about justice, about protecting the legacy my father left behind. And though the pain inside me as a daughter never faded, the fire inside me as a leader only grew stronger. I was no longer afraid. I was ready. The day of the board meeting, I felt my heart pounding, but my resolve was stronger than ever. Elaine and Derek still thought they were in control, believing I had no idea what they had done. They walked in with confident smiles, expecting to continue their game without interference. The board members, unaware of the situation, settled into their seats, ready for a routine discussion. I waited until everyone was present, then called the meeting to order, keeping my voice calm but firm. As the discussions began, I asked for a moment to address a serious matter. The room went quiet, and all eyes turned to me. I explained that there had been irregularities in the company accounts while I was away, and that evidence of unauthorized transactions had surfaced. I handed over the documents I had collected: emails, forged signatures, and transaction records. Each piece was carefully organized, showing a clear trail of deliberate manipulation. The board members leaned forward, eyes widening as they went through the evidence. The shock in the room was almost tangible. Faces turned pale when they realized the betrayal came from within the family itself. Murmurs filled the air as people struggled to comprehend how someone so close to the company's core could be behind such a scheme. Elaine stood up, her expression shifting from surprise to anger. She tried to speak, using her familiar voice of manipulation. "Caroline, I'm your mother. Family comes first. You're overreacting. We only acted because we wanted what's best for Derek." Her words were rehearsed, cold, and desperate. I looked at her, my chest tightening as tears formed, but my voice did not waver. "Family doesn't steal. Family doesn't betray. You lost that title the moment you chose money over me," I said, every word deliberate. The room fell silent. I felt a mix of grief and relief. Grief for the betrayal I had endured, and relief that the truth was finally out. Derek shifted uncomfortably, realizing the weight of what had been exposed. Elaine's attempts to defend herself fell flat against the solid evidence. The board members exchanged glances, and it was clear they now understood the depth of her deceit. They had trusted her for years, just as I had, and now that trust was shattered. I continued calmly, explaining that their access would be revoked immediately and that legal actions would follow. Every word reinforced that the company was no longer a place where lies and manipulation could succeed. For the first time, I felt a sense of empowerment. I was no longer the victim of their schemes, and though the pain of betrayal lingered, it was outweighed by the clarity that justice was being served. As the meeting ended, Elaine's face twisted with frustration, and Derek's shoulders slumped in defeat. The company was finally under the leadership it deserved, and I stood there knowing I had taken the first step toward reclaiming what was mine. The room was quiet, but inside, a storm of emotions settled into a steady calm. I had faced them, confronted the betrayal, and I had won. After the board meeting, the changes were swift and final. Elaine and Derek were immediately stripped of any access to the company. Their keys, passwords, and authority were revoked, leaving them powerless. It was a relief to see that the board acted decisively, but it didn't erase the sting of betrayal. The people I trusted most had tried to destroy everything I had worked for, and the emptiness of that realization settled deep in my chest. I knew legal action was necessary. The next day, I filed a lawsuit for embezzlement, presenting all the evidence I had collected. I wanted the court to hold them accountable, to ensure they faced real consequences for their actions. It wasn't revenge for revenge's sake. It was about justice. The betrayal wasn't just a family conflict. It was a criminal act, and they needed to answer for it. Through it all, Grandpa Henry became my anchor. He stood by me completely, offering comfort and strength. "You did what was right," he said softly, placing a hand on my shoulder. "I am proud of you. You protected what your father built, and you did it with courage." His pride and unwavering support gave me the strength to face the fallout without breaking. For the first time in weeks, I felt like someone truly understood the depth of what I had endured. Elaine, on the other hand, could no longer hide her true self. She screamed accusations at me, calling me ungrateful and heartless, trying to twist the narrative as if I were the villain. But her words only exposed her selfishness and obsession with control. Her anger and entitlement revealed the real reason behind her actions. It wasn't money that motivated her. It was jealousy, a desire to dominate and dictate what I should or shouldn't have. Derek, though quieter, showed no remorse either. His eyes, once filled with arrogance and entitlement, now reflected shame and frustration. He had been complicit, yet he too had underestimated my resolve. It was clear that both of them had believed they could outsmart me, manipulate me, and take what they thought was rightfully theirs. Sitting in my office later that evening, I reflected on the truth of it all. This situation had been about far more than finances. It had been a test of character, a battle over trust, power, and respect. The people who should have supported me had tried to undermine me for their own gain. And yet, despite the hurt, I realized something important. I had survived it. I had acted decisively, protecting the company, upholding justice, and proving to myself that no betrayal could define me. The company was safe, the law would hold them accountable, and my grandfather's pride reminded me that loyalty and integrity mattered more than anything they could steal. In that moment, I understood the deeper lesson. Sometimes the hardest battles teach you the most about strength and resilience. I had faced the worst betrayal of my life and come out stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. After the dust settled, I felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. The company was back under my control, the betrayal had been exposed, and justice was underway. Yet, even with victory in hand, I couldn't shake the ache in my chest. The wounds left by my mother's betrayal ran deeper than money or authority. They cut into the very trust one had placed in family. I had gained power and clarity, but the price had been heavy. I decided to visit Grandpa Henry. Seeing him always brought a sense of calm I couldn't find anywhere else. He greeted me with that warm, steady smile, the one that had always reminded me I wasn't alone. I sat beside him, letting the quiet of his home settle over my restless thoughts. After a moment, he spoke softly. "Caroline, you did what you had to do. You protected what mattered, and you stayed true to yourself. Remember, love doesn't always come from blood. Sometimes it comes from loyalty and from the people who choose to stand with you." His words hit me harder than I expected. I realized that the love I had sought from my mother had never been unconditional. She had chosen power over family, control over trust. In that clarity, I finally allowed myself to grieve. Tears fell freely as I cried for the mother I had wanted, the support I had never received, and the bond that was broken beyond repair. It was a mourning that had nothing to do with death, yet it felt just as profound. As the grief slowly ebbed, it left space for resolve. I understood that I couldn't dwell on what was lost. The company, my father's legacy, and the people who believed in me deserved leadership that was fair, honest, and steadfast. I made a silent promise to honor that responsibility. I would run the company with integrity, making decisions guided not by fear or revenge, but by the principles my father had taught me. The clarity was liberating. I no longer had to be defined by betrayal or disappointment. I could lead from a place of strength, shaped by the pain but not consumed by it. Grandpa's presence reminded me that the bonds we choose, friends, mentors, loyal colleagues, often carry more weight than those dictated by blood. The loyalty I had from Mason, the board, and Grandpa reinforced that I wasn't alone, and that their trust was worth protecting. Sitting there, I finally allowed myself to breathe fully. The storm inside me had calmed, leaving a sense of balance between loss and hope. I knew the road ahead would still have challenges, but I was ready. I had survived the ultimate betrayal and emerged stronger, with a renewed sense of purpose. The grief of losing my mother's love remained, but it no longer weighed me down. In its place was clarity, determination, and a deep commitment to lead with integrity, honoring my father's legacy in every decision I would make. Looking back, I realized the deepest pain often comes from those we trust most. Betrayal isn't always from strangers. It can come from the very people who are supposed to care for us. Experiencing that from my own mother and brother was devastating. For a while, I questioned myself, wondering if I had failed somehow. But I soon understood that their choices reflected their greed and jealousy, not my worth or ability. After exposing their actions and regaining control, I focused entirely on rebuilding the company. Every decision I made was guided by the lessons my father taught me: honesty, hard work, and loyalty. I strengthened the team, created stricter safeguards, and worked to restore the company's reputation. It was a long process, but each step proved that resilience and integrity could overcome even the most personal betrayals. While the financial success mattered, the real victory was emotional. I learned to stand tall even when my own family tried to destroy me. I discovered inner strength I didn't know I had, and I realized that true leadership isn't just about business. It's about protecting what's right, making difficult choices, and refusing to be broken by those who wish you harm. This journey changed me. I no longer expect unconditional support from everyone who shares my blood, but I do know the value of loyalty, trust, and choosing who belongs in my life. I've rebuilt more than a company. I've rebuilt my confidence, my sense of justice, and my ability to move forward without fear. If my story moves you, I hope you remember one thing. Strength comes from standing firm, even when betrayal cuts deep. Protect what matters, trust wisely, and never let someone else define your worth. If you were inspired by what I went through, please don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this story with your loved ones. You never know who might need to hear it today.